I'll be the one cooperative person who uses the thing. It's on. Is it on? Is it on now?
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, it's a great panel and a great discussion this afternoon. I appreciate that you put this on. You can tell from the discussion that people in the audience were coming from different political positions and have different visions of the future to some extent. Maybe we're that's about 3 or 4 steps ahead of exactly what kind of future we're going to be able to bring about. But what seems to unite us is a sense that we need a structural solution to this, not a local solution, and that we need to address the economy and have a different kind of economic organization than the current one we have. And also what's coming out clear is that the obstacle to change is obviously white identity in Australia, a certain formation of white identity in Australia. You can see that sort of from who's in the room and who's not in the room, and from many of the comments. And it's because clearly it's about which narrative about helping refugees doesn't challenge that notion of white identity, the compassion stuff, although compassion is good, and which narratives of dealing with racism and refugees does challenge that white identity narrative. I don't think we can rationally convince white Australians to change, but I do think that we need to think beyond who's in this room and how to build a larger coalition, have 100 people at your next meeting. And toward that end, my question was about the labor movement. And I wondered if anybody on the panel could speak to an experience of trying to, because I noticed in one of the flyers that passed around, there's a rally on September 19th that lists a bunch of labor unions. I'm not talking about the Labor Party, I'm talking about the labor unions in Australia who are co-signers with this rally. And I know that many of the kids who go to this university must have parents who are members of labor unions, or they themselves may be members of labor unions. So I'm wondering if anybody can speak in an honest way about the pros and cons, the good and bad of working with the labor unions in Australia to broaden the coalition for this agenda.
I think that was actually quite a brilliant summation of all the things that we touched upon on the panel. I don't know how to respond exactly to your question about trade unions in a short way, so I'll hand over to Ellen.
Okay, look. Trade unions in Australia have been implicated in racist structures right from the beginning, right? So most people will be aware the White Australia policy is left-wing policy in order to preserve the white working man's paradise. And today you have unions calling out against the importation of foreign workers, and this whole, you've been following the news around this China free trade agreement. We can have our criticism of free trade agreements in general, but the idea that the biggest threat of this agreement is foreign workers being brought in and undercutting, I mean, that's just old school racist diatribe. Then you have other unions who have been participating in for example, in detention because they have workers who are members who work there. It's right here in terms of what we call the border industrial complex. We have a problem because in Australia everybody is mandatorily a member of a superannuation fund, and as academic workers we're members of a superannuation fund called UniSuper. And UniSuper had until recently investments in Transfield, which is the company that runs offshore detention. It recently sold some of those shares, but has refused to come out publicly to say that it will never again invest in mandatory detention. So we have a job as members of the National Tertiary Education Union to fight, because we have a member on the board of UniSuper, to fight for UniSuper to divest from Transfield, and also Decmil, which is another company that's involved in mandatory detention. So there is a role for unions, but one that most of them have not really stepped up to as yet. Some unions are better than others, but it's a very much an open question in Australia.
Do we have any final comments from other panellists? I'm just mindful of the time.
Just in terms of refugees, leading the refugee movement, I just wanted to shout out one organisation, RISE, Refugee Survivors and Ex-Detainees in Melbourne, which is a historical radical organisation run and managed completely by people from refugee backgrounds, and who, often find themselves at odds with the refugee movement because of their criticisms and their analysis.
Yeah. I might leave it there and thank you all for coming. And thank you.